Back together again, eh?
Yeah.
Let's play.
There we go. Well, at least I was able to discover I was muted before 100 people had to tell me. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Nicholas Lamar Suter, and this is the Rundown. Before we begin, a couple of quick things. This is, I think, one of our more important shows, and we're going to get into some details as to why today was a horrific day. If you've been paying attention, why tomorrow will likely be at least as bad, what it portends, what we're going to be looking at, and why it matters. Before we get into that, there's something that matters slightly more, and that is you. We have had an audience that has been very, very supportive to us in general. At the end, I like to say thank you to the audience, and I certainly try to say thank you to everyone who has super chatted, and those of you who've supported by becoming members or joining the Patreon. But when I look at things like what's happening today, I get a little bummed out. You may get a little bummed out. We're going to keep going. And In Time's going to keep going. We're going to keep reporting this to you, and hopefully people are going to keep standing up against this kind of thing. Having said that, the only way we can keep going is because of the support that we get and the contributors. There's fresh blood coming in, learning the ropes on the Discord and helping us out. And we are going to do more shows, and they're going to get even better. And that's because everyone here is dedicated to that process. And we couldn't do it without you guys. And it's hard for everybody nowadays. And you guys have our backs. And I think I can speak for everyone who works here that we all sincerely appreciate it and thank you. So, now that I've said that, somebody pointed out I leave his andering open even when he's not here. He used to be here regularly on the breakings. Now I usually include him only on the ones, the big ones where we're on the breaking, not the rundowns. The rundown's hard for him to do because he can't do research while he's driving. But the breaking, he's critical. Anyways, so golly gee, Nick, I didn't notice anything big happening today. Yeah. Between them, an average of 100 years of history are about to get wiped out. Historical precedent. We're pretty sure this is going to happen. There's almost no stopping it at this point. So we're going to talk about what the case was today, what the case will be tomorrow, and we don't know when the decisions will come out, but we know almost for certain what those decisions will be. Today's was about basically the civil service. Now, what many people may or may not realize is that the civil service in the U.S. is actually a thing. There used to be a civil service agency that would help people joining the civil service sort of acclimate to government work and so on and so forth. Nowadays, it's just sort of the civil service means you're working for the U.S. government, but not in a political capacity. That's all it means. You're working in some kind of professional capacity. And it could be whatever. You could be mopping the floors, you could be coding, and your job is not bound by politics. It's not influenced by politics. You're supposed to do your job regardless of the political ideologies of those who are running the government. Now, I've seen a number of newspaper articles talking about basically what is about to be, it looks like, the end of the civil service and how it dates back to Humphrey's Executor. We'll get to that in a minute, but it actually predates Humphrey's Executor, and that's actually really very important. When Garfield became president, he was part of a system known as the spoils system. Now, this is roughly the same system you see in any dictatorship, you see in any corrupt, you see in Russia. It's one of the reasons why when Russia decided to invade Ukraine, their tanks and vehicles due to dry rot, due to all sorts of just catastrophic failures of the Russian military, took 6 weeks to travel a distance that I can go in one day in my Honda Civic. This kind of corruption is about rewarding political allies and not about actually getting the job done that you were elected for. Now, James Garfield was a proponent of this, a beneficiary of this, as was his vice president, Chester A. Arthur. Garfield lasted as president about 9 months before he was assassinated. Arthur actually wanted to see an end to this system. So in a lame duck session of Congress, they got together and had basically a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to end this system where, A, they were installing their friends, and B, installing people who would tout and require, as a member of the job, that you vote for said political candidates. So if you joined any if you joined the, Food and Drug Administration, which probably didn't exist back then, but any administration, as a maintenance worker, they'd say, oh, who'd you vote for? Well, sorry, you voted for a Democrat. This year you're going to vote Republican or we're going to kick you out. And that was the system. It's called the spoils system. And so you would reward your friends, and your friends would also make sure that you would get back into office again. And it was immensely corrupt. And Chester A. Arthur decided that with Congress, who had been trying to pass this for a while and had been fought both by Garfield and by his predecessor in trying to overhaul the system and creating an actual civil service, a service whose job it was to do the work of the government regardless of the policies. Now, as science has become more important and higher education, rocket science, literal rocket science, nuclear science has become more important, the neutrality of the civil service has become more important. Do you put an actual nuclear engineer in charge of the nuclear warheads at the NORAD, or do you put Juan, the guy who, I just realized that was immensely racist, just going for Juan myself. I was trying to come up with an original name, and that was the first one that came in. David, Dan, Joe the plumber, who is a plumber and voted for McCain, and, therefore he gets to be in charge of the nuclear warheads. Which do you think is better? So then we ended up Chester A. Arthur passed the Pendleton Service Reform Act, which basically said that going forward, any non-appointed position in the federal government would be picked based on merit alone, not on who you knew, your political connections, or what your political ideology was. That was in 1883. And since 1883, that has been the fundamental understanding of what the civil service is and how it operates. In 1939, and this is the one that most people use, the Hatch Act was passed, which basically just took the other side of that and said, while you were in the civil service actively doing your job, you were not able to campaign for any ideology, any political office, anything like that. You couldn't do it. So your boss couldn't come to you and say, hey, I really like this candidate. No, you could not discuss politics at work if you were in the civil service. That was the Hatch Act. So, now let me see. And the Hatch Act is also known for, well, actually, let me just, forbids the intimidation, bribery of voters, and restricts political campaign activities by federal employees. So we've heard this before because Trump has violated the Hatch Act by essentially trying to bribe personnel. But it basically says if you're a federal employee, you're not allowed to go around, and this is why it was a big deal too when Biden was ostensibly campaigning for Kamala Harris, which he's not supposed to do while in office, and he's not allowed to say, for example, go to the head of Ukraine and say, hey, Zelensky, Harris would be a much better choice for you. She would. It's true. He probably did it. It's a violation of the Hatch Act. At any rate, the Hatch Act is... let me see. I don't think the Hatch Act is the one... Is the Hatch Act the one that the FTC, I want to say it was, no, Humphrey's Executor versus United States. So after all of these acts were passed, the civil service is created. I want to say Franklin Delano Roosevelt, I want to say, that's a guess. I do have a link to all of these below, decided that he wanted to fire a member of the FTC. And he did, but he admitted when firing the member of the FTC that the guy had actually done his job properly and hadn't been neglectful, hadn't screwed anything up. He just didn't like his politics, so he was firing him on that basis. Hatch sued, saying that you couldn't fire him on that basis based on the previous. I confused those. Humphreys, apologies, sued, saying you couldn't because it violated the Hatch Act. Before the suit was resolved, Mr. Humphreys died, so his executor continued on his behalf and on behalf of the state, which is why it's called Humphrey's Executor versus United States. But in that 1935 decision, the Supreme Court unanimously upheld that that the president couldn't fire him because he was not a political appointee. He was a member of the civil service. His job was apolitical, and he could not be fired for political reasons. If there was a valid reason, like he gave the nuclear codes to Russia or something, which I'm aware it's 1935, not an issue at that point. But you get my drift. If there was a valid reason, he could do it, but he couldn't do it for political reasons. That was a unanimous decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. So that is the decision that is now been challenged at the FTC, no less. So what I'm going to do really quickly, I want to get the info here. So in what's called Trump v. Slaughter. Now this gets to unitary executive theory. Now, what unitary executive theory is the notion that all of the executive branch falls under the control of the chief executive, which would be the President of the United States. Now, it was FDR fired William Humphrey, who was the commissioner of the FTC, and the Supreme Court unanimously said couldn't do it because of the Hatch Act. So, Trump appointed Slaughter. He appointed her to the FTC in his first administration. In his second administration, he decided her politics no longer aligned with hers. And in a letter very similar to the one that Humphreys got, said, look, you're not being fired for cause. And that was an important and reasonably kind thing to say so that she can go to her next boss and say, no, I was fired for political reasons. It's not because I'm incompetent. So the firing was reasonably polite and said, oh, it's not for cause. Don't worry about that. It's just because we don't like your politics. So you're done here. She sued, saying that he could not fire her based on those grounds, based on the precedents of both the primarily the Humphreys, but also the Hatch Act and the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act. Based on all of those, he couldn't do it. So a court not only found that she was likely to win, but was willing to grant a stay of her firing and said that she had to be rehired because the likelihood was she was going to win. This was an almost identical case. Humphrey's executor was at the FTC, and it has, by the way, been reaffirmed time and time and time and time and time again at nearly every administration. There was I'm trying to remember now what the recent. There was one just like 8 or 10 years ago. Somebody tried to fire at a different administration, and they said it's not the FTC, so it doesn't count. And like, no, the FTC administration, the Humphrey's executor decision was at the FTC, but it applies to the entire civil service. So no, you can't fire from any administration. So sorry, from any of the Federal Trade Commissions Act of 19. Okay, thank you. So it's been reaffirmed with multiple agencies that no administration can fire people from these agencies simply because of their politics. They're apolitical appointees. Now, you may have noticed that there is a commander-in-chief in office right now that seems to have been kind of doing that. And he's gotten away with it to some extent because he's appointed people to do it for him, so he's not doing the firings. It's RFK Jr. doing the firings and so on and so forth. But nonetheless, this has been explicitly prohibited just to avoid corruption. We do not want to end up in Soviet Russia with the only way you can get money is to toe the party line, to do what your boss tells you to do, regardless of reality. This is a huge step towards fascism. Now, she won. They appealed. She won the appeal, getting to keep her job. It was then put to an emergency shadow docket case to the U.S. Supreme Court, which immediately reversed the stay, meaning she was now fired pending their ultimate hearing of the case, which they heard today. Now, that they reversed the stay is extraordinarily important. A stay can only be issued if A, the court finds that there is harm. If they don't put a stay, there's going to be significant harm. And B, if you demonstrate you're likely to win. So the appeals court was very sure she was going to win. Sure enough, they're like, yeah, no, bring her back into the office until we've decided this, but you don't get to kick her out and then just say, yeah, we've won. No. And the U.S. Supreme Court was so sure she was going to lose the appeal to them that they said, no, kick her out. That's fine. Don't worry about it. We'll make it official in the winter. Winter has come, ladies and gentlemen, and today they heard Slaughter v. Trump. She was a member of the FTC. She was fired for political reasons only. This is not contested by either side. Her argument that the law does not permit her to be fired for legal reasons, and there is loads of case law to support that. The government's argument, no, she falls under the executive branch. Ergo, Trump can fire her for any reason he wants, and even without reason. She is an at-will employee. Some of the arguments that have been used have been absolutely stunning. Let's see. In arguing for the removal and for overturning, and this would be basically overturning Humphrey's executor, the attorney on the Trump side said, I don't think there is such a thing as an independent agency because everything has to be in one of 3 branches of government. I don't think there's ever been an independent agency, and I think the removal of I think the removal protections have been unconstitutional from the beginning. Now, what he envisions is literally every time there's a new president, you fire the entire civil service corps because they're all loyal to the other guy. They're going to undermine you. You can't, and you rehire somebody, and they all get on-the-job training for 4 years, maybe 8 if you're lucky. This is an absolutely insane plan. on behalf of Slaughter, quote, independence allows the decision-making that is done by these boards and these commissioners to be on merits and about the facts and about protecting the interests of the American people. Yeah. That's what Americans deserve from this country. Kagan pointed out that if this ruling were allowed in favor of Trump, it would hand the president, quote, massive, unchecked, controlled power, and that Congress has delegated significant power to federal agencies that regulate key aspects of American life and business, from finance to air traffic safety, and has specifically, using its authority, regulated those to be independent of the presidency. What you are left with, she said, if this is allowed, is a president with control over everything, including much of the lawmaking that happens in this country. So having a president come in and fire all the scientists, all the doctors, and all the economists and PhDs and replacing them with loyalists and people who don't know anything is actually not in the best interest of the United States. Let's see. There was a number of I don't want to go into all the arguments I had earlier here. One of the arguments that one of the conservative justices had used, but long story short, what we've seen is a couple of things. One, we saw this court. Oh, yes, Chief Justice John Roberts, when talking to Slaughter's attorney, said, quote, Humphrey's executor is just a dried husk of whatever people used to think it was. It was addressing an agency that had very little, if any, executive power, and that might be why they were able to attract so much broad support on the court at the time. Again, them winning Humphrey's executor by unanimous decision. Humphrey's executor is very much a dry husk of what it used to be, but that's because this court over the last 8 years has been chipping away at it quite deliberately. So they chip away at it, and they're like, don't worry, the 90% of the decision, 80% of the decision, well, 76% of the decision is still completely, 72, 61% of the decision is perfectly intact. 58% of this decision is perfectly intact. Don't worry about it. And by the time they get done, well, this is only 30% of the decision it used to be. Why on earth are we keeping it? They're the ones. And Kagan is correct. This will leave the president with control over everything. If he doesn't like what you say, if he doesn't like he can shut down air traffic and he's already said he's pulling, what is it? Food stamps or SNAP funding for Democrats until they can prove that they're using the funds correctly in the way he wants. Republican communities don't have to prove it. They're assumed to be doing it correctly. Democrats are assumed not to be and will not get the money until he says. This is the exact kind of abuse that Humphrey's executor was designed to stop. It is staggering. He is attacking entire states. All of the six judge majority of the court, every one of the conservatives, suggested very strongly that they would rule in Trump's favor in this decision. And again, that must already be the case. Otherwise, they would not have overturned a stay. So the fact that they overturned a stay was a troubling sign. The U.S. Supreme Court is not going to overturn a stay unless it's planning, the chances are 90% or greater that it's going to overturn the original ruling. So when they overturned the stay, it was over. And people listening to and talking, I just told you what Roberts said. Humphrey's executor is a relic. Okay, I think I know how he's going to rule. And Roberts isn't the most conservative judge there. So what does this mean? We will get back a ruling. They had oral arguments today. They are going to consider it. They're going to talk, barring a liberal justice somehow being able to convince a conservative justice to flip. They will essentially overturn Humphrey's Executor, which has been a landmark case for 80, 90 years, and overturn the entire concept of an independent civil service that is not beholden to party and is hired based on merits, that has been in place since 1882. That is what we are looking at. And if I had to wager, the chances that they will succeed are over 98%. This is as close to a foregone conclusion as you can get in the law. So that was today. Let's talk about tomorrow. Tomorrow they're going to be hearing another case. And let me bring that one up because there was a lot, and I do apologize. I went off on the history of Humphrey's Executor and how the civil service came into being, but I did that because I want people to understand the civil service is not just a name. It's an actual thing, and it's a concept, and all of that. When that was written, we went from there to to the single most powerful country on the planet. And it was because we were able to put the politics down and let the science and let the experts lead. And that can be a scary thing to do because the science and the experts speak languages we don't even understand. Quantum metamorpho collapsing quasar thingamabob. I don't know what any of that is. And every now and then they speak condescendingly to you. Ooh, that's all right, because you speak condescendingly back. We all do it. But that is how we got where we are. And the court knows that. They do know that. They just don't care. They're so corrupt. They're so busy lying to Congress, which they've done. They're so busy saying that they shouldn't. Literally, Roberts went to Congress who was trying to come up with some ethical structure to apply to the court to say, no, we're above any ethical structure. You cannot apply an ethical structure to the U.S. Supreme Court. No rules of ethics, no guidelines, no ethical, none. Anything that we do is voluntarily and non-binding because we are ethics. That was his argument. Right as we were finding out how much Justice Thomas was taking in bribes, but that's another story. So, moving on. That was Trump v. Slaughter, Hatch Act. I know I'm missing something. I'm terribly sorry. How is it? So that was heard today, and what I can't believe that the one we're hearing. That was Franklin. Everything. I think I did a last minute info dump on this particular case and forgot the. Let's see. Oh well, Alina Hababa resigned as U.S. Attorney for New Jersey. That's actually tied in because Trump's really pissed about that. He wants her to be the New Jersey attorney, and the courts have said, no, you can't do that because the states actually have a say in that through their states, through their senators. And he said, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's literally Trump's opinion. But he lost that, so she got fired. But he wants to be the one who's going to be sorry, I need to. He wants to be the one who's going to make all the decisions. I mean, when nobody would prosecute either Comey or Letitia James, he had to fire enough people until he got to somebody who would do it, which again is the whole problem with getting rid of the civil service is, he's now stuck in a position where how much money did he waste? How many criminals are going free because he's out there covering his own ass and getting our civil service and our tax dollars? That was the other one that the Hatch Act was supposed to prevent, was our civil servants, while they're on the clock, campaigning for their bosses. They're not allowed to do that. They can do it off the clock. They can't do it on the clock. I pay my taxes. That means, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to quickly check the live chat, see how everyone's doing. Sinister Porpoise, $5.12. What? People don't know what I mean when I say the GGMST problem in NP is hard unless P equals NP. I know. We should do a show just on that. No, you know what? We are absolutely not going to do a show just on that. That would just remind me too much of I would have bad memories. Oh yes. Oh dear. So now that we've discussed what the court heard today, these were oral arguments. What are they? She got fired. She wouldn't step down. So there was this weird thing where, let me rephrase that. They were told she couldn't be hired in the first place and she didn't have a job and she didn't have prosecutorial powers. She refused to step down, so all New Jersey cases came to a grinding halt because she refused to step down, but she also wasn't the attorney general. So she had gotten fired, but she wasn't gone. So until she left the position, they had no attorney general and there were cases piling up that couldn't go forward because she did not have authority to move on them, but she wouldn't step down. It was... all right. So, tomorrow, they're going to hear another case. There's going to be oral arguments. We'll probably discuss it in time, Xander and I, tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern. The National Republican Senatorial Committee is arguing that money equals free speech. We've heard this before, and so far it's worked. But it's worked in a limited way, and one of the things that's been limited is that the DNC and the RNC, two huge organizations, are not permitted to coordinate with candidates past a certain point. They can do it to a certain amount and then they can't. The idea behind this, and it's 90% show, it has some efficacy, but not really. The idea is, look, you can only give so much to a candidate, but you can say anything you want to. So as long as you're not working with that candidate and giving them the money, you can still say you're for them and say why you like them. You just can't be giving them the money so they can say it. That makes any sense. So I like Barack Obama. I can donate up to $2,500 to his campaign. Past that, I can't donate anything else. But I can donate $2,500 to a political action committee that's for Obama, and they are going to talk about what he wants to do with schools. And they're going to do, and as long as they don't coordinate with Obama, as long as there's this what's so-called Chinese wall, it's all legal. How often do these committees coordinate with? That depends. I was a political operative for a while. I was just below that level. I saw signs that there were definite... There were ways that one could telegraph where you needed people to pay attention. I mean, if the candidate stands up and says, we're going to talk more about schools. We haven't been able to talk about that right now, but don't worry, we'll talk about that. Then every political action committee is going to be like, oh, they need to talk about schools. Let's go do that. Was that a communication? Oh, for fuck's sake. This is one of the reasons I got out of this shit. So, what they want to do is remove all of those barriers. Now, there is a common sense reason that I do kind of agree with them on which is there are so many ways around those barriers anyway. They don't entirely exist. That's true. But they actually do exist. They do slow the corruption down. There is a channeling of the corruption. There's a slowing of it down. And in my view, political action committees like this shouldn't exist in the first place, but they do. Okay, fine. But if they're going to exist because of free speech, then let them say what they want to say. Don't let them be a mouthpiece for somebody else who has limits for reasons that we've decided upon, yada, yada, yada. All right. This would remove all of those limits and allow the RNC and the DNC to spend unlimited money on candidates. Now, to some of you, again, this is going to come as a surprise. I thought they already did. No, the candidates raise their own money. And the RNC and DNC also raise a lot of money, and they do give a little bit to just about every candidate. The RNC and the DNC have also worked for candidates at the state level, and they give money to candidates at the state level. It ain't much, but they give candidates at the state level because they know it helps them if the state candidates win. What this would say is they can give as much as they want. So basically all you have to do is give as much money as you can to the DNC, and the DNC will give all of that money to the political candidate if your political candidate's a Democrat, so on and so forth. In essence, this will gut most of the remaining, according to Newsweek, quote, removing one of the last major safeguards against corruption and will accelerate the post-Citizens United deregulation of political spending. Is this as bad as Citizens United? It's hard to measure. In some ways, it's worse because it removes even more guardrails, but this couldn't have happened if you didn't have Citizens United first. So Citizens United allowed this. This takes the damage done by Citizens United and amplifies it significantly. So if you were already against Citizens United, it's about to become worse. This is one of the last guardrails. If this is permitted, the next logical argument is, well, okay, if the DNC and RNC can donate unlimited amounts to the candidates of their choice, why can't individuals? And that's a fair argument. That's true. I don't think the DNC and RNC should be able to. But if this court finds that they are, there is no reason logically not to permit individuals who would normally just go through the DNC or RNC anyway, and especially since individuals presumably have at least, if not more, speech than corporations, although corporations are people. So once again, you get back to the idea at this point, you can spend as much money as you want and anybody can pour. Now, Elon Musk poured a lot into Trump's efforts and into the campaign. There's so much getting around it already. This is going to open the spigot. We are going to see, if this is permitted, we are going to see spending the likes of which you have never seen. You thought it was bad? This midterm, they're going to spend more money than they probably have on any presidential election, full-term election in history, and this is just going to be the midterms. If this passes, I'm betting the chances are over 90% this one's going to pass too. So now the combination. We're going to have one that says you can give, essentially where it's going to land is you can give as much money as you want to any political candidate you want, and the other one that says that everybody in the federal government works at the pleasure of the president. Meaning they give him the results that he wants, the answers that he wants, and that they campaign for him too if he wants. If he says, we're going to have the FDA come out and parade, and everybody at the FDA is going to campaign for the president and talk about how the president has been so great with the Food and Drug Administration, they have to. And there's no recourse. The only recourse is going to die as a result of today's arguments. So, it's been an interesting term. At any rate, we figured it was worth covering both of those. Tomorrow's arguments, barring anything, like I said, we've got a show tomorrow night. In time, it'll be myself and a Xandering. But short of that, and we'll be keeping an eye on anything breaking. There's a couple things that we've been looking at, but we'll let you know if it becomes something we think you need to hear about or aren't going to be able to get reliably from somewhere else. It's I'm looking at the CNN right now. Supreme Court signals Trump will give Trump more control of government. All control of the executive and anything ostensibly under the executive, even if it answers to the legislative. That's the other thing. These agencies were created and funded by the legislative. That was, and in the original Humphreys, one of the things that they pointed out was that these were legislative entities. And because they needed administration, they fell under the executive, because that's an executive function. But all the executive did was cut the checks and give interim appointees if needed, and nominate people if and when he could. That was it. It wasn't his job to fill every single position. Now he gets to choose for every single agency. That's terrifying. All right. So, yeah. That's where we stand. We'll again tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern, is Andrew and I for In Time. Thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you once again for your continued support, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern for In Time. Have a good night, all.